Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Goodeaux. I am a connection coach, and I wanted to talk today about some topics surrounding forgiveness, and that is boundaries and righteous judgments. And there was a fantastic teaching that Out of Ashes Ministries gave that I'm going to link at the bottom about forgiveness. And some of the material that they used actually came from Bema podcast, so I'm going to link that as well because I just can't recommend them enough. At the end of the teaching, there was a discussion that was opened up for everyone to join in, and someone brought up about wondering when you can know when it's time to move on from any kind of relationship, even whenever forgiveness has taken place. And so PJ, Pastor Joe from OAM, he actually brought up a really great response about knowing yourself. And so I just kind of wanted to elaborate my 2 cents around this topic because it's at the heart of what I do as a connection coach. It isn't just talking about what we should be doing, it's also helping people understand how to get there, to the best of my ability anyway. And this is just something that's really been on my heart for a long time. So it is my personal opinion that a big portion of knowing when to move on comes back to boundaries and righteous judgment. And this is one of the hardest conversations to have with believers because, as OAM coined the phrase, toxic forgiveness is the guiding post that we live by. We don't like to think that we can forgive people and also not engage with them personally. And that's why I highly recommend that you go back and you watch that teaching first, because it's really thorough about this process, what that looks like and why, and just some really beautiful things. But on our side, what we're doing, let's talk about getting something really important out of the way, which is what are boundaries. We probably hear them talked about a lot. It's one of those like buzzwords that floats around every now and then whenever like the self-help kind of stuff comes around. So we repeatedly hear how important they are to have, and the thing is that you can't really enforce something that you don't have any clarity about what they are. So simply put, boundaries are the things that we help you define what you need to feel safe and how you want to be treated in your relationships. And this can be boundaries in areas like emotionally, physically, sexually, workplace boundaries, material boundaries, your time boundaries. So just to give some like examples, some emotional boundaries might sound something like, I understand that we both got carried away in a heated argument. In the future, let's refrain from name calling so that we can continue the discussion respectfully. Physical boundaries might be something like, I don't feel comfortable hugging. What about a fist bump? Material boundaries might be something like, you can borrow my lawnmower, but please make sure to fill the gas tank up whenever you bring it back. Boundaries around your time might be something like, I understand that it's hard to make it to appointments. If after 20 minutes we can't get started, then I'll have to move on with the rest of my day. And it's important that we know what boundaries sound like, because when was the last time, and especially if you're a chronic people pleaser, because this is like my jam, right? I'm a big people pleaser. When have you really sat back and actively thought about the boundaries that you have? What are the things that you need to feel safe in your relationships? Write them down. You can even have a conversation with the other person about them once you get more clarity. Like, hey, we've had the discussion about this boundary before. If it keeps becoming an issue, let's go over like why you're struggling. I understand what's happening here. We're working on it, but I need this to not happen anymore. And if it happens 3 or more times, or whatever that looks like for you, then we need to reevaluate the relationship. Because once you sit down and you start evaluating what actions do or do not make you feel safe, then you can get a clear understanding of which relationships feel comfortable or uncomfortable to you and why they feel that way. So it might be that healthy boundaries aren't being enforced in the relationships that you're not really comfortable in. And then, of course, the hard part comes with actually enforcing them, because it kind of leads back to my next point. So for me, judging people has always been kind of hard. Not even just because of like the classic trope that we get in the Christian world about not judging others, but because I consistently talk out of what I talk myself out of what I know to be true, because I give people the benefit of the doubt. So if someone does something and I can clearly see the results of their actions and they tell me what their explanation is, then I would think that my understanding meant that I had to act like whatever they did was okay, even if it wasn't. And so it's one of the most powerful tools that I learned in therapy. Look at their actions from an objective view and then have a conversation with someone about it. And if during that conversation you do understand, it's still important that you also make sure that healthy boundaries are in place. Understanding doesn't negate that you need to feel safe in the relationship. That's what relationships are about. They're mutual, safe, secure. And that's really what made me love this book. It's called How to Judge People, A Practical Guide. And it was written by Moshe, I'm going to butcher the last name, Goldberger? It's Jewish theology based, and it's about righteous judgment. And even if you don't agree with Jewish methods as a whole, I really think it's worth taking into consideration if you're a people pleaser. The basic concept of what this book is getting down to overall is that is looking at what consistent overall fruit that a person produces. So there are 3 types of people. There are the people who have generally good fruit, but they mess up sometimes. There are people like teachers and rabbis who are extra good, and that doesn't mean like, oh, just because you're a teacher or rabbi or something that you're like automatically in that extra good category. It's more like because you have consistently shown extra good fruit, you have become that category. And then you have the people who produce consistently bad fruit. And this book encourages that we should be inclined to judge favorably for the first 2 types of people, but not the last group. That was pretty powerful for me. If we're being honest, almost everyone falls under that first 2 categories. And that encourages us to judge in their favor. Give most people the benefit of the doubt that they weren't doing it maliciously. That way, whenever you approach the conversation for resolution, then you deal with them differently. And you carry the offense in your heart differently. But when we do find people who produce consistently bad fruit, judge that that's who they really are. And aiming for resolution and righting the wrong will be carried out differently because you understand they were likely doing it with harmful intent. And I do want to emphasize, like, none of this means that good people can't do bad things and bad people can't do good things. Like, it's not about that. It's being able to have a kind of guideline to help you. That way, whenever you approach these considerations, you approach resolution and you approach reconciliation, you can have a guideline for, hey, maybe this isn't something I should continue, versus, you know what, you probably didn't have a bad intent with it and we're working on it, and it's okay to work on it. So now let's bring this back together with boundaries. If in any kind of relationship you find yourself needing to constantly remind someone that they need to follow a boundary, that they keep disrespecting, and that you know that they're disrespecting, that you know they understand they are disrespecting you, it's clear that they don't just disrespect that boundary, they don't respect you. Because if they don't care about your boundaries, then they don't care about your safety in the relationship. And that's an observable action that you can see. And something else that might help you is looking at the way that they respect or disrespect other people's boundaries. Is this a noticeable pattern for this person? Are they more concerned with their own needs, their own wants, their own desires than they are concerned with the person that they're in a relationship with? And it's important. It's an important note that you don't try to guess what they're thinking. Always call back to the things that they've actually said, that you've heard, and consider the things that they've actually done, that you've witnessed. Did they push someone out of their comfort zone? That way their own comfort zone could be met and accommodated. And did that other party express, like, did you hear them express, or did you see them express their discomfort with that in some way? Look and listen for the evidence, like it's a detective case, like you are evaluating the evidence of what's happening here, because it's the only way that we can see what kind of fruit they're producing. This can help you make a decision about what's best for you, and when it's time to create some distance between you and this other person. So because even whenever the other person might be confronted in a loving way and in a kind way, the other person might apologize, and that might even change their behavior for a time, but it doesn't mean that they actually changed, because then they usually end up falling back on their old patterns, and it becomes an avenue for allowing and enabling this person to do that to you, because you're telling them, like, hey, I'm serious, I want you to follow this boundary. And then they get the inclination that you're not actually serious. You only need to see it for a short time, and then you'll stick around and put up with it no matter what. And they, it gives them this information that you will tolerate it. So, okay, so now we want to look for some heartfelt change, okay? Instead of looking for somebody who just wants to avoid the consequences of their actions. So what does all of this mean? Now that we've kind of gotten a basis, what does all this information tell us? If they're proven to not be safe, and I don't want to continue this unhealthy pattern with this person, don't I have to stay in a relationship with them because that's what I'm called to do? And really what we're called to do is to be loving and kind. That looks like we need to genuinely be praying for their healing, even whenever they hurt us. We need to be able to have a civil, respectful conversation, even if you aren't in a close relationship with them anymore. That looks like not refusing basic human needs like clothing or food whenever you can help offer it. It looks like working and trying to have a heart for God so deeply that even if you can't find it in yourself and your own strength to hold kindness for this other person, that you'll make the effort to cultivate that kindness, because you know that you love him enough to do that. You know that that's what he wants from you, so love him enough to at least want to cultivate those things. Even if you don't get there, and it will take you a long time to get there, and that's okay. Just make the effort to want it because he wants that of you, and because you love him enough to try. And I also feel like it's necessary for me to disclaim that if you're in any kind of abusive situation, in no way am I advocating or encouraging that you should be on speaking terms with this person or engage in relationships with them. Safety is of the utmost importance. And if all you can do is work on your own healing and your nurturing in your own space, then that's what you need to do. It won't heal overnight. That's a good thing. It'll take enough time and space to bring yourself back to wholeness in God before moving on to other things. And that's great. So these are just two powerful lessons for me as a recovering people pleaser, and I hope that they'll be a blessing to you too and bring some healing. So shalom, and thank you for listening.